Welcome to Campfire Curmudgeon. My name is Heidi, and with me is...
Nicholas Jones.
Nicholas Jones. Hello, Nicholas. How are you today?
I'm good, Heidi. How are you?
I'm good. Why are you talking so low? I'm going to call you out. You're like, you've got radio voice ready. Like, gather on the radio. Well, Nick tells you a story.
I think it's because my customer voice is broken.
You broke your customer voice.
I took 50 calls on Saturday.
I'm sorry.
I only worked
50 doesn't sound like that much.
In 4 hours.
That doesn't sound like that much.
It's a lot.
Okie dokie. I believe you. I'm just saying the number 50 doesn't sound like a big number.
Divided by 4 hours.
In the world of numbers.
Yes.
I don't do math. That's not my thing.
That's 12 calls an hour plus 2.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
What did I click? Anyways.
I just did 2nd grade math.
Congrats.
Yay.
I'm really glad you could do that.
Mrs. Mueller is very proud.
I don't remember the name of my teacher in 2nd grade, and I can't do math. So, anyways.
Yeah.
We have a special episode for you guys today. We have a listener...
Submission.
You couldn't wait for me to say it. We were reached out to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds weird. But all right. Andrew Dexter reached out to us with a really interesting story. This is actually a true story, and this is a story that happened to him, his family, and family friends. So he actually experienced this firsthand.
Interesting.
So it's pretty cool. It's a pretty well-documented story. And I have his whole story here today to tell you. He has titled this The Ghost of Gladstone Villa, because the home he lived in was called Gladstone Villa.
And this is in Wales?
This is in Wales. This is where this took place.
I'm a Jones. That's Welsh.
Congratulations.
Yay. Fellow countrymen.
I don't think so, but good try.
Maybe I could get dual citizenship. I don't know. That'd be nice.
You can try for it.
Yeah.
Let me know how that works out for you.
Yeah.
So this is
especially
the story.
with Brexit. All right. Anyway, we're not.
Wait,
no,
why
we're
would you?
We're not going to talk about Brexit.
Okay. This is the story as told by Andrew.
Uh-huh.
My family and I lived at a large property called Gladstone Villa in the former mining town of Bargoed in the Caerphilly County borough of the South Wales Valley in the UK. From 1969 to 1978, we experienced activity that simply defied rational explanation, such as lights going off and on. We witnessed electrical cables being pulled, and my grandfather Bill claimed to have had a glass bottle thrown towards him as he entered the main bedroom, missing him by inches. I didn't personally see this myself, but I still recall the time he came from there with the broken bottle in his hands, and he had told us what had happened. There was the occasional sighting, but this was very rare indeed. So rare that in all the 9 years I was there, I never once saw it, but I did hear it many times in the bedroom. It is still worth mentioning that my mother, Caroline, saw it on at least 2 occasions. There were also regular footsteps heard in the main bedroom every evening. Sometimes during the day when we'd be all downstairs watching TV, one of us would turn the volume down so we could hear more clearly, and my grandfather Bill would point to the ceiling and say, "He's by here, and he's by there now," trying to make out where the footsteps were coming from exactly.
Ooh.
There were 5 members of the family that were living at Gladstone Villa. My maternal grandfather, William Higgs, known as Bill to family and friends. He was a retired miner who worked at the local colliery. He was a short, bald man who liked nothing more than to listen to his country and western LPs, Johnny Cash and Glenn Campbell and so on.
Right.
He also liked westerns on TV.
I don't actually like most westerns, but some westerns.
You like what? Well, you do like... You don't like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood? Those are his favorites.
I hate John.
Oh.
I like Clint.
My maternal grandmother was Rita Higgs. She was a short woman who was a housewife. She was completely teetotal, but she liked to smoke. She also liked collecting garden gnomes and liked watching soap operas on TV. My mother, Carolyn Dexter, met my father at the local bakehouse in Baldwin Street. She was day shift regularly, and my father worked the night shift. He would stay behind to make her a cup of tea and chat.
Aww.
Isn't that cute?
Workplace romance at the bakehouse.
They dated for 3 years.
The bakehouse.
The bakehouse, yes.
Yeah.
They dated for 3 years before they got married on Monday the 1st of April, 1968. The Beatles were number 1 with Lady Madonna. Very apt. They did not get a place of their own, but they decided to live with my grandparents at Gladstone Villa, which was in Cardiff Road. I was born on the 24th of August, 1969, when everyone was listening to the latest number 1 in the charts, Honky Tonk Woman by the Rolling Stones. It was soon after that my mother said that strange things started to happen. I find that very interesting that a lot of stuff started to happen after he was born.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, he also said that they lived there from like 69 to 78, so 9 years.
That's when he lived there.
Right, and it's the first 9 years of his life. That's crazy.
Yep. I was just a baby when she said it all started off rather quietly, like small tapping here and there, but nothing too noticeable. But in time, the activity gradually increased. One time my mother said the family heard a noise like someone jumping down from the attic and onto the landing. Naturally thinking that someone was trying to break in, they went to see what was going on. When they got there, they found nobody there, but the hatch to the attic was open. Whatever it was eventually occupied itself in the main bedroom, which incidentally was my grandparents' room. It soon made its presence felt by walking around the bedroom, and the sounds of dragging could be heard. That's pretty creepy. Footsteps and like somebody dragging something
across a floor.
Yeah. Ugh. Especially when you're home alone, you're like, oh, okay, what is that?
Like, and what is he carrying?
Yeah. One day, my mother went upstairs to that bedroom to get my father up for work so he could get ready for his night shift. When she got there, she was confronted by the sight of the ironing board placed on my father's torso as he slept. When he awoke, he was astonished to find the situation he was in. He suspected my grandfather Bill was playing pranks. But in time, he knew my grandfather was not responsible for it, and he told his work friends what was going on there, and it got around town that Gladstone Villa was haunted. My parents separated in 1972, and my father left Gladstone Villa, but it wasn't because of what was going on at the Gladstone Villa. It was just a breakdown of the marriage. They finally divorced on the 25th of April, 1975. The British band, the Bay City Rollers, were number 1 in the charts with Bye Bye Bay again. Very apt. It would have been amusing, but for the fact of what was going on there. I was barely 2 years old, so I have no memory of my father living at Gladstone Villa, but he would come to see me every Saturday to take me to see my paternal grandparents and to the local cinema. Great times, even though the paranormal activity still continued. As I got older, I too witnessed the activity for myself. I actually saw the poltergeist activity for myself. I saw the electrical cables being pulled by unseen forces. I saw the lights going off and on. And when my grandfather Bill would play records on the Sunday as the family did the dinner, it would turn the music off.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
This goes to the interpretation of the writing. When you imagine pulling on electrical cables, what do you imagine that
I'm imagining
like?
Pulling plugs out of the wall.
Okay. I'm imagining like basically an extension cord being dragged off by something, and you can see the
too.
end of it, like it's outside on the lawn.
Yeah,
and it's being like dragged, and you're like, I can't see the other end of it, but what is that?
I was imagining more like them just either being yanked on or pulled out of the wall.
Yeah,
like popping out the wall all of a sudden.
Like, I don't like this.
Yeah,
the wall. Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw the lights going off and on, and when my grandfather Bill would play records on the Sunday as the family did the dinner, it would turn the music off. It took exception to the British band Slade and any religious TV shows my grandmother Rita would watch, so that's interesting. The local police were also involved. I remember them popping their heads into the attic, hesitating, and not going in, but they suggested it was my father playing a prank on the family. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like somebody must have called hearing some loud noises or something, and the police were like, oh, it's just your dad because he doesn't live here anymore. He's just come back playing pranks on you. It's fine. We don't need to check up there. Bye. It sounds like they were even a little bit freaked out.
Yeah, just like, why are you digging into this?
Yep. A family friend, Mrs. Ivy France. She was more of a friend to my grandmother Rita. She was a very skeptical woman. When my grandmother told her that Gladstone Villa was haunted, I can still remember Ivy going into the main bedroom, looking around and saying it was vibration from the traffic outside causing it. But she was soon to change her mind when she experienced it for herself. It was then she suggested the local press and a medium. The medium was John Matthews, and when he came to Gladstone Villa, he started by asking the family questions. He then began challenging the spirit to perform by knocking on the ceiling.
Mark Twain
and
shows
sure
up.
enough, it responded by knocking back at him. At some point, John went into a trance to try to make contact, but he failed to get a name.
A trance?
A trance?
Trance, yeah. Anybody still listening? If you haven't turned off the podcast, thank you.
You're welcome. Are you quite finished?
I'm quite finished.
He later confirmed the obvious, that there was indeed a presence there, and it was an earthbound spirit, and that it has unfinished business. A priest by the name of Graham Jones. Uh-oh. You got a priest in your family?
I got several.
Jones is a Welsh name, after all.
Several priests in the family. I think brothers. I'm sure they're decent people. I don't know.
Is one of them named Graham Jones?
No.
Oh. A priest by the name of Graham Jones was called to Gladstone Villa. He blessed the property, and after a few prayers, he duly left, and it was quiet for a few short months after that. No incidents. But it did return with a vengeance, and this time it decided to show itself. One evening, my grandfather Bill, my mother Caroline, and I were watching television. My grandmother Rita was reading a book, when all of a sudden my mother just so happened to look to her left, and she saw the full, solid figure of a monk standing by the doorway. We did not see this, as we were otherwise occupied, but she later described it in details as a monk in typical brown habit, complete with hood over the head, so she didn't see the face. It sounded very much like a 16th century Benedictine monk. Fred Davies was a friend of my grandfather Bill. They worked together at the local colliery, and he would visit most evenings. Fred was a slim man who would wear a flat cap and glasses, and smoked homemade cigarettes that hung from his lips when he spoke. He would sit in his favorite chair by the open fire and talk to the family and watch TV with us. One day, Fred was with us in his usual place by the open fire. I was quietly playing with my toys by the sideboard.
For those unfamiliar with the word colliery, I just looked it up. It is basically coal mine and the infrastructure around it.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I was quietly playing
I was unfamiliar, so I went and looked it up.
Well, thank you. I'm sure a lot of listeners were as well. I was quietly playing with my toys by the sideboard. It was quiet when all of a sudden there was one very loud bang.
Bang!
Thank you, Nicholas.
You're welcome.
It was so loud that Fred ducked his head and ran to my mother for comfort. When it was quiet, we all went upstairs. My grandfather Bill would always be first, and I would be last. When we got to the bedroom, we found nothing that could account for the noise. Fred later told us that he ducked his head because he thought it was going to come through the ceiling. Fred told us of another experience he had had at Gladstone Villa. My grandfather Bill liked to look out the landing window that overlooked Cardiff Road and into Bargoed town centre. This time, Fred joined him. He said he felt something brush past him. When he looked, there was nothing there. The most frightening experience I had was when I was alone in that particular bedroom. I made sure the light was on. It was very quiet. I was lying on the bed facing the window that overlooked Cardiff Road, when I suddenly felt something heavy pounce on the bottom of the bed. I heard the bed springs go just once, and I felt the bed bounce. I didn't look straight away, but when I did, there was nothing there. I went downstairs to tell my family, and we all went back up. We saw distinctive paw marks on the bed, like that of an animal.
Ooh.
I later found out that my grandfather Bill had a black Labrador dog, Toby, who died before I was born.
Ghost dog.
Interesting.
Way of the Samurai.
All right. I think it's
a movie.
Kind of surprising that they assumed it must have been a black Labrador dog, because it kind of seems like a bit of a scary experience.
Yeah.
And for something that left some sort of marks on the bed, I would almost feel like that was something more
vicious than a black lab.
Yeah, scarier.
Well, I mean, can you imagine being a black lab, or just kind of a dumb dog in the afterlife? Like, this is I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm in constant mode.
No, I've never tried to imagine myself as a dog in the afterlife.
Yeah.
Is that something you do often, Nicholas?
Just did.
Just did. All right. What other things do you imagine yourself doing in the afterlife?
I don't know.
You don't know. Our curmudgeon doesn't know.
Yeah, flying.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
A flying black dog going, I don't know what I'm doing.
Sure.
My grandfather Bill and my mother Caroline claimed to have heard a baby crying there, but as I didn't hear that at the time, I took very little notice of what they said. The activity got so bad that my mother, grandmother, and I slept downstairs with the lights on. It was only my grandfather Bill who was supposedly brave enough to sleep there. It was then that he himself had yet another experience in there. He told us that he was lying on the bed when all of a sudden he couldn't move. He couldn't even shout for us to help him. This could well have been sleep paralysis, but it was said he heard something in the room with him. My grandmother Rita had her own experiences. One day she went upstairs in that room to get my grandfather up. When she saw the boiler door wide open by itself, she didn't stay there to see what it was, but she rushed out of that room. On another occasion, she said she had a sensation of something pulling from under her foot, like she had stepped on a gown. We had this ghost for so long that my grandmother Rita gave it a pet name. She called him Johnny, and my grandfather Bill would shout out that name to provoke a reaction, but nothing would happen. Ivy Francis's son Charles got to hear about what was going on at Gladstone Villa. You remember Ivy was the one that said, oh, this is just vibration, this is nothing, but then was like, oh, we got to call the press, we got to call a medium.
Yeah.
So her mind was changed. And it looks like she spoke to her son about this. And he came along with some friends, and with my family's permission, they went into the bedroom. It frightened one of his friends, and to this day, that friend still says it was a very spooky place. My mother, Caroline, had an operation on her and ended up on crutches to support her. The local nurse would tend to her foot. My mother was sat on the chair when the nurse came this day, and the nurse knelt down to tend to her, and she told my mother not to hold her. My mother looked at my grandmother Rita in amazement, as she was not holding the nurse at all. My mother made her own conclusions that it was Johnny the ghost that was holding her, so as not to let the nurse hurt her.
Ooh.
The only time I heard the ghost being vocal was the time we were all in the room. One of us wanted to use the bathroom, and we couldn't get in there. My grandfather Bill said, "He's behind there." I heard quite distinctively the sound of Gregorian chant, and that was it. Nothing more. We're going to play a little Gregorian chant for you, for those that don't know what it is.
Imagine that coming from your bathroom.
So they heard that from the bathroom. And Gregorian chants, according to Wikipedia, it's a tradition of Western plain chant, a form of monophonic, unaccompanied sacred song of the Roman Catholic Church. It developed mainly in Western and Central Europe during the 9th and 10th centuries. A lot of people say that it was Pope Gregory the first who invented it, but apparently that is not true. So if you want to know more about that, dig on in.
I actually, in my music collection from the 2000s, I have a Gregorian chant cover remix. They did a cover of, like, I Can Feel It Coming in the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. And sung in Gregorian chant, yes.
All right, well, maybe we should have used that.
Yeah, maybe we should have.
Just kidding, please.
Well, we don't need the copyright, right?
Yes, Nicholas, we don't need the copyright.
Well, oh, no, we don't need the copyright violation is what I mean to say.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
We left in the summer of 1978 when two local businessmen bought the property, and Gladstone Villa was eventually converted into a small hotel. Its name was changed to Red's Park Hotel. On the night before we moved, there was one final incident we experienced, as if it knew we were going, and it was its way of saying goodbye.
So his childhood home was turned into like a B&B?
Yes, it was turned into a little hotel, actually. I will post the picture of that. I've already posted the picture of what Gladstone Villa looked like at the time that Andrew lived there with his family, or approximately around that time. And I will post a photo of what it looks like once they made it a hotel. I think they might have built on a little bit, but yeah, it was quite a big building.
Interesting.
He had a extended family living there for a while. So my mother, grandmother, and I got ready to go to sleep. The light was still on, and then we heard the doorknob turning, as if someone was trying to get in. At first, I naturally suspected my grandfather Bill, as he was the only one who slept upstairs in that room, and we thought it may have been him playing a prank. I called out to him, but there was no answer. No laugh that would have given him away. We then heard our belongings that were packed in the hallway being thrown about. The next day, we asked my grandfather Bill if it was him playing a joke on us. He insisted it wasn't him, and to this very day, I believe him. I had my 40th birthday at Red's Park Hotel in August 2009 for old time's sake. And it was the female staff that told me about the ghost. And I told them about what happened to me there 30 years before. The staff told me of their own personal experiences, lights going off and on, the odd sighting in room 5. A bride in white was seen again and again, as with claims of the baby crying that still made no sense to me at that time. I did a thorough research of the property and the Cardiff Road area, and I found out some very interesting things. I found out from Bargoed Library and local newspaper archives that Gladstone Villa dates back to the 1900s, and it was named after the former British Prime Minister William Gladstone. I discovered that the previous people that lived there, the Kimmiett family, in 1924, were a new married couple, Michael and Evelyn Kimmiett. They had a son, Elvin Kimmiett, or I'm not sure if it's Kimmiett or Kimmitt. I believe it's Kimmiett. He died at the property just 4 months old, according to the archives of Cardiff newspaper, the Western Mail, of that year. This explained the baby my mother and grandmother my mother and grandfather heard in the bedroom, as well as it sounds like staff and patrons of that hotel hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Evelyn Camille died in 1970, soon after I was born. Maybe this is why the activity all started. I also found out that there was a monastery in Baldwin Street where my parents met and worked, and there is a property directly opposite the former Gladstone Villa property in Cardiff Road, dating back to the 16th century. It is now a public house called the Rafa Club.
Mm-hmm. A
priest hide is said to be there, but it is sealed up. This could explain the monks my mother saw. So, do you know what a priest hide is?
What is that?
I
want to hear your definition.
It's basically like a little hole that priests would hide in. During the 16th century in England, it was considered high treason to be a Catholic priest.
Oh, yes.
So they would have these little holes they would basically just pop into, and like little secret like trapdoor that they could hide in to avoid authorities. What I have said here is true. I wouldn't share this if I couldn't possibly back this up. And I have used real names, as I have nothing to hide. And all I have said can be verified by the family of these people I mentioned. Sadly, some of the people I've mentioned are no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
I challenge any hardened skeptic and firm non-believer, and I can assure them that they will indeed most certainly question their belief system of this. I have no doubt at all whatsoever. In fact, I'm 100% positive. You may Google this property. It is still there in Cardiff Road, Bargoed Wales, UK. Very near Caerphilly and Cardiff. This place needs to be thoroughly investigated and is well worth documenting. I'm quite serious about this and very sincere. Andrew Dexter.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for your lurid tale. It's very interesting.
It's very interesting. It's very well documented. And what's interesting, too, is he no longer lives there.
Mm-hmm.
I know that Red's Park Hotel has closed. From what I found, it looks to be some type of like a bed and breakfast or still like a hotel, some type of a rental property.
Right.
I may be looking at the wrong building. Google Maps was a bit squiffy. But if it's where I looked, then they've done quite a bit of a facelift. It doesn't look quite the same as it did when it was the hotel.
Yeah.
The hotel still, when you look at those pictures, the actual structure of the building still looks very much like it did when Andrew's family lived there.
Yeah.
But it looks like now they've given it a bit of a facelift, so it's a little bit difficult to tell. But what's very interesting is he no longer lives there. He doesn't own the property. He doesn't really have any monetary gain by telling his story.
Right.
And what's also interesting to me is that this was backed up by other individuals.
Yeah, when he went back
friends,
to visit the staff.
Yes, the staff.
He had no possible connection to the staff.
No, before he had told them, they had begun telling him, oh, we have a ghost here. And he's like, oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me more. So I think that's very compelling to me. It's very interesting. What does our skeptic think?
The skeptic thinks that...
Would you spend a night there?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Would you be scared?
I'd probably get scared, like your guest bedroom sometimes.
Well, I asked Andrew if he was scared ever when he was living in the villa, and he said occasionally, yes, absolutely. But when the activity was very quiet, we lived relatively normal lives and went about our business.
Uh-huh.
So it sounds like, for the most part, it was peaceful with occasional, knocking, maybe cords being pulled. Nothing too terrifying, but then every great once in a while, it sounds like it would get a little bit more intense and maybe a little bit more frightening, which is kind of interesting. I wonder if it was just one ghost. I know his grandparents gave it the name Johnny, but I do wonder if there was perhaps more than one entity or
could be,
type of haunting taking place in that location, because it seems strange to have like such calm and then people being touched and grabbed and doors being held shut. Can you imagine not being able, you want to go to the bathroom and you can't open the door, so then somebody goes to try to jam the door open and you hear a monk chanting? That would be so absolutely strange. Oh, turn it off. That is not what he heard. And that does not count as Gregorian chanting because it's accompanied by music.
Of course.
And as we know, that goes against what the actual definition was.
Right.
I was like, can I still hear it?
Turn it off. I've turned it down. It's just, but yeah, that would freak me out as far as like the music and also like,
it's not what you expect.
The Catholic
either.
History Hideaway because of the persecution of the newly created Anglican Church, right? Like,
I also read, so you can actually search, if you search the Ghost of Gladstone Villa, you can see that Andrew Dexter has actually spoken about this on many different websites. You can find it. And at one point I saw something about that there was a possibility that there were underground tunnels leading to certain areas. So it would be very interesting to see if there was any tunnels near Gladstone Villa, if any of them met up with that old church. That would be very interesting where that priest hide was.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see if that was actually true. I'm sure that would be difficult because a lot of things like that got, buried or covered up or whatever when they were no longer in use. But that would be really interesting. And it would explain, the proximity would explain kind of like a residual type.
See, like we could hop on a plane and go to Wales and check it out, but can ghosts travel like internationally? Or like,
why? Are you trying to get the ghosts to come here?
Yeah, wouldn't just...
I'm not sure if it works that way. Well, what's interesting is they had that medium. That medium said, I mean, it is a bit, what the medium said is a bit, I guess, stereotypical. Or found spirit with unfinished business.
Like, everything sounds like, it's like, oh, the Mark Twain character shows up, right? Just the guys that get kicked out. He's the guy, he's the snake oil salesman that gets kicked out of the town in the first couple chapters of Huck Finn.
You're funny.
Yeah, I try to be.
You're funny.
I'm literate. I read books.
So do I. We're in a library. This is the podcasting
Donde
library.
está la biblioteca? Aquí.
Aquí.
I am here.
Yep, I am here in the library. You're welcome. Jeepers. My foreign language skills are on point. Also, I am sure I butchered so many of the pronunciation.
Yeah, sorry.
You'll have to forgive me, Andrew. I can hardly read as it is.
The Welsh are cringing.
At
least you got Jones right.
Well, if you want to hear, what I'm going to do is there is a video that was posted, I believe it was posted a while ago, of Andrew actually telling this story in his own words. So you can hear him saying it, and you can hear his beautiful pronunciation of all of these places that I said horrifically. He has like a lovely accent. So I will post that link so that you can listen to that as well. It's a little quiet, so you'll have to maybe turn it up a bit, but I guess our podcast is a little quiet too usually, so there you go.
We have
Did you just turn it up?
Yeah, no, I turned our headphones up.
Oh, okay. I was like, don't do that. The poor thing
and
can't
now
take
it's loud. Loud, quiet.
People love that. They love to have to play the headphones up, headphones down, headphones off.
It's like listening to System of a Down. Joking.
I see.
I'm joking.
You just picked a band?
No, I picked the band that does loud, quiet.
Oh, I see. What's really cool, too...
What do you want to do? Why do you put the keys up on the table? Anyway, sorry.
Are you okay?
Yes. I'm having a crisis. What's up?
Oh, do you want to talk about it?
No, I don't.
We talk about it on my other podcast.
Yeah. No.
This one's for ghosts.
No crisis.
No crisis.
Yeah. No ghost crisis.
Anyways, if you'd like to look at this area for yourself, I'll post a photo of the property as it was as Red's Park, and I'll post a little link to the Google Map location of this so you can kind of play the little Street View game and you can check it out. It's a really, really nice area. Like, the whole area is just very cute. A lot of nice little houses and stuff. It's that perfect little feel that we never have here.
Like old UK countryside.
Yep,
yes.
like what we never ever have here.
It looks like Hobbiton.
Nope. No, it sure doesn't.
Looks better.
Definitely doesn't.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like a bunch of dirt holes. It's very nice. And it's very interesting to me, too. There's a pub right across the street from where he was. There is, and I believe, I'm not sure if that's the building. I don't think that is. There's a nearby building, the Raffle Club. Mm-hmm. That's where the priest hide is supposed to be. And I did read something about there's going to be a paranormal investigation of the Raffle Club. Mm-hmm. So you can search that. I'll see if I can find the link to that on YouTube, and I'll post that as well. So that should be really interesting. That's where the priest hide was. So I don't know, maybe see if they heard anything. That's just a car. You turned around so fast. I was like, the priest hide. Vroom. He was like, it's here. That made a believer out of our curmudgeon.
Yeah, the Anglicans are here.
So are you...
The Church of England is here.
Oh, gosh.
They're not going to find the Catholic priest.
Well, they're going to get Jones. They're coming for you.
Graham. Yeah.
They're coming for you.
Yeah, I'm not a priest.
My apologies. Here I thought all this time. You mean all those confessions? That doesn't count? You were just taking my secrets? Is that how that works?
Yeah. I'm a fraud.
I'm a fraud.
I'm a medicine man.
Well, what do you think? Do you find the story believable?
I do. I don't find, I'm not gonna dispute somebody's. I'm not gonna curmudgeon somebody's experience, right? It's unprovable.
But do you feel like there are other explanations for the things? I find it really interesting that Ivy said perhaps it's, cars driving past, because there are some buildings like that are so close to the road, as we just heard. Depending on what kind of road, what kind of way your house was built, you might feel a little vibration.
And last time I was over, we were watching that show about the guy in the English countryside who was renting
his house, yeah.
And he was on like a curve, and everybody came downhill the curve and then right through his house. Yep. It happens like 5 times a year. So
you would think, okay, well that sounds like a plausible explanation, but then when you have the person saying it's nothing, here's another explanation going, okay, call the press, call a medium. That leads a little bit more believability to me.
But also, like, your grandparents and your other family members, and then you leave and come back and find, like, oh, they've converted the old house into a hotel, a B&B, and the staff is like, oh, you know about the ghost. Like, oh, of course I do. Like,
I find that very interesting. Yeah, it's not that, because I don't think that, I'm sure a lot of people knew Gladstone Villa was haunted, it was spoken about, but I don't think it was so widely known that staff would have heard about it and regurgitated the stories, because it sounds more like they were telling stories that they had as actual experiences themselves, and not something that they were just saying, oh, I heard this story. It sounds like they were seeing as well. I find it interesting, they said room 5, I believe, so I wonder that was probably the same room where they heard a lot of footsteps and such. That was the room where people occasionally have a sighting. I'm not sure if they always saw the monk, or it sounded like they also saw a bride, but there were so many different families that lived in that house from what I could find. It looks like that house, there was a family called the Jones family.
In Wales.
In Wales.
You don't say.
Did you have family in Wales that lived in this house?
I haven't followed my paternal grandfather back that far.
Maybe you should take a look.
Actually, I have.
Do you have a Henry Jones in your family, or an Albert?
I believe there's a Henry. Henry Jones Jr.
The Jones family were there during the First World War. A letter was discovered that was written by Mr. Henry Jones, stating that his son Albert was a prisoner of war in Germany in 1919.
No, it wouldn't have been my relation. It would have been cousins, if anything, because my grandfather's grandfather.
Because Jones is such a unique name, I'm sure that
my grandfather's grandfather, Joshua Jones, fought in the Civil War under Sherman. He was injured at the Battle of Resaca just before Sherman burned Atlanta to the ground.
You like to talk about that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. But, so, there's a long history of a lot of things happening. Can you imagine the emotions going through you if your son is a prisoner of war? There was, let's see, the Kimmiett family. Those are the ones with the baby. That was in the 1920s. The Williams family lived there in the 1940s. Their son was actually born there March 1948, and they moved out of that house in 1950. Then the Mills family lived at the property. Edgar Mills lived there, and it looks like he had claims of haunting as well. The Higgs family moved to Gladstone sometime in 1960. William George Higgs with his wife Rita and their only daughter, 10-year-old Caroline. So that was his grandparents and mother. So it's very interesting. There's been a lot of different families in that house, and a lot of different experiences. Somebody losing a child. I think that that's kind of the perfect storm for a type of haunting, whether it be something intelligent or even just leftover residual.
Sure.
I think like the baby crying, that's very interesting. I find it interesting too that he didn't hear it, but other people did. It's like I wonder what kind of people were more susceptible. If it was parents are more susceptible, used to hearing, listening for a child in distress, if that's like a built-in instinct that he didn't have at the time,
Yeah, it could
makes you more susceptible to hearing that.
Sure.
But it sounds like a lot of people heard that crying there.
Right, like the baby. I'm like, wait, baby means there's more than one, or it could be, or it's temporal. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it's always interesting too because there's been a lot of different legends of different types of entities that will mimic a baby cry. Different types of,
because it's distinctive to the human ear, and
it's to trick humans. So it's kind of interesting because a lot of the time in tales you'll hear a baby cry and then a person will go towards the baby cry and that's when they'll run into trouble. It'll be so it's kind of that if I heard a baby cry I would be very uneasy. I would actually find that far more scary than any of the other sounds, and footsteps.
Knives Out.
Yeah, footsteps wouldn't freak me out as much. The Gregorian chanting I'd find really weird, but I think that even would not be as creepy as the cry of a baby in a house with no baby.
Way too organized, right? Too many voices. It's probably a record player.
Well, no, I don't know. I don't think that's as scary. Just something to me. It's like, oh, it's nice singing. It can't possibly mean anything harmful, but it's like, why is it crying? What does it want?
Yeah.
I like that. Well, I think that's really interesting. If we have any listeners that are in Wales that know of this location, if you want to stop by and check it out, that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
It seems like it might be some sort of private property.
Don't trespass. Don't break
it looks
laws,
like
please.
it's something you could rent. But if you're looking for a nice little vacation place, if this is the place I found, then it looks like you could rent there. I'm sure you could walk past and take some pictures if you wanted, or just take a look at the building now, see how that's changed. Or if you have other stories, if you visited when it was Reds Park Hotel and you had an experience, that would be really great if you could let us know. You got anything else, Nicholas?
No, I think I'm very thankful that Mr. Dexter decided to share the story with us.
Absolutely. And Andrew Dexter, thank you so much. If you have any, if you have any more information you want to tell us, or if there's anything I butchered horribly, feel free to let us know. Anything we need to make a correction on, or if you have any additional details. And additionally, if any of our other listeners have any questions, if you could post those to the Facebook, perhaps Andrew would go ahead and answer some of those questions for us if he so chooses.
Yes, and you can always reach out to us online on Twitter at CFCurmudge. That's my handle on Twitter for the Campfire Curmudgeon account.
Yep, and you can find us on Facebook, and there's all the links there. I think we have the link to Twitter, the link to Instagram, all that fun stuff. And all the other wonderful podcasts on the PopGo Podcast Network.
All right.
Well, thanks for listening.
And to keep the campfire burning.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, campers, thanks for listening. Got any scary stories? Send them to campfirecurmudgeon@gmail.com or message us on Facebook. You can even send a text or leave a voicemail at 480-442-0124. Don't forget to visit us on Instagram and tweet us at CFCurmudge.
Thank you.